Hey, David Brewster here on an episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords of Allan Holdsworth. And I'm going to go ahead and say this at the beginning of this lesson. This is the most difficult episode of Chordplay I've put together so far on my channel. This is really hard. So this is top of the mountain kind of stuff. And for those of you familiar with Allan Holdsworth, the late great avant-garde and experimental, guitar genius, then you know what's coming. All these crazy stretched chords and very demanding, fingerings and shapes, on the fretboard. And if you're not familiar with Allan Holdsworth, prepare yourself, because you're going to definitely have a shock to your fret hand, to your eyes, and possibly your ears too, because Allan's music revolved around a lot of dissonance and atonal, ideas, and a lot of chromaticism, and lots of altered chords and diminished ideas, harmonic major, all this very advanced, and very technical tonalities and sounds, and really unusual, but I love his music. I've always, been a big fan. And as soon as I heard that Eddie Van Halen, was influenced by Allan, I dove in. I was like, well, who's this Allan Holdsworth? Now, one thing about Allan's technique that's notorious, and definitely, before the internet and before YouTube and things like this existed, we had guitar magazines. And, I think Allan appeared, not only in the magazine and being interviewed and features, but also the advertisements. And one of his notorious, kind of legendary things was his fret hand, his reach on the fretboard. And I definitely remember, when I was younger looking through guitar magazines, I would see photos of him and my jaw would hit the floor. I'd think, what chord is that, And you'd see these just crazy lizard finger, chord shapes and fingerings. So here's an image with a little bit of what I'm talking about, just so you can kind of have a visual and see how impressive, his hands on the fretboard actually were. This lesson is definitely a continuation of the previous Chordplay episode, the stretch guitar chords episode. And I knew I was going to hit Allan Holdsworth, but I thought about it and I thought, I need to do some sort of primer to kind of help those of you out there that are, working on stretching and kind of getting your hand fanned out. And I wanted to put that lesson together and then follow it with this. And for those of you that are curious, if you really want to dive into this stretchy, wide intervallic universe, I did have a lesson. My very first guitar player lesson, it was the February 2015 lesson. It was called Hands Like Holdsworth. And it's basically an exercise and workout type of lesson in the style of Allan Holdsworth. So it doesn't really have any of his licks, but it has a bunch of wide, stretching exercises and all these things you can do to kind of help you get more reach and ability on the fretboard like this. One more thing. Obviously this episode is going to be very different than pretty much all the other episodes of Chordplay so far. So I'm talking, I had to kind of put the warning about the wide intervallic stretches, I don't want anybody to hurt yourself. So definitely take this very slow, and I'm going to I am going to show, examples from some of Allan's songs, but the technical hurdle makes it really hard to just jump in and start jamming on some Allan Holdsworth, because you literally have to sit there and work on physically, performing some of these chords. And then once you really start to kind of gain this ability, then yeah, you can tap into actually trying to play some of his songs. So we're not really going to feature a lot of his music. I'm going to supply you with some exercises. I'm going to give you some of, Allan's favorite chord fingerings and shapes, and you can kind of play around with them. And if you're like me, sometimes I get inspired when I just hear a chord. I'll just hear, something a little different or kind of an interesting tonality, and it'll spark this kind of creative, idea in my mind where it's like, hey, I like this chord. And then I'll kind of fish around and play with it and see if I can find, some chords to kind of pair it with and build a progression. Next thing you know, you're writing a song. But all the examples are going to come from Allan's very famous I.O.U. album from 1982. And, he had tons of music. So I am kind of centering on that one album, which is very popular, Holdsworth release. But check out a lot of other stuff. Definitely go back, listen to Soft Machine and some of his collaborations too. The first example is basically a stretching exercise, and this is going to kind of help you get, some of the technique and some of the stretching ability under your belt. And we're just going to start with the Stairway to Heaven chord. I just want you to start with A minor right here in the 5th position. All right, very typical, very common, popular chord. But what I want you to do is we're going to change that to an A minor add 9. So we're going to take this A note on the D string there on the 7th fret, and I want you to stretch up with your pinky and grab the 9th fret on the D string while you're still holding down this 5th fret bar on the G, B, and high E, like this. And you can kind of hear that shift in the chord right there. Now if that's too hard, because that is kind of, you know, a little bit lower on the fretboard, and that is a pretty wide interval right there. And you can kind of hear that minor second right there. Seconds and those dissonant intervals in its chords. But if that's too hard, let's relate this to, you know, something else that has an A. So let's do D minor right here. You know, so that A note actually appears in D minor as well, and we're just using that open A string. But there's the D minor, you know, triad right there, D minor over A. And then let's do D minor add 9 over A like this. The same thing we did in A minor, but in D minor, so it's a little bit easier because the frets are a little closer together. And then you can slowly kind of start moving down, you know, try it in other keys. And if you really want to challenge yourself, you know, there was A minor add 9, D minor add 9. If these are too easy for you and you've already got your hand kind of worked out and stretched out, then try F sharp minor over A like this. And there's F sharp minor add 9. F sharp minor 9 over A, I guess. Or F sharp minor add 9 over A. And that's another thing with this lesson, there's going to be some crazy chord names as we dig a little bit deeper here. But that's a good workout. You could start higher and then gradually, you know, work your way down and eventually get down to some of these areas. But just take it really slow. Next up, we're going to reveal some of his extended shapes and kind of where they came from, because if you just dive into Allan Holdsworth without actually kind of studying and noticing some of his habits and things that he would do, some of these chords are going to really confuse you because you may not recognize where they came from. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to move up to C, all right? So think of C major, and then we mentioned these add 9 chords, you know, in the stretch guitar chord episode before this, but there's C major add 9, right? So what I want you to do is don't worry so much about the root note. We're going to remove that, and I want you to start thinking of that shape like this. So that's C major add 9 over G right there, because we removed that lower C, right? Okay, so C major add 9 over G. Now what I want you to do is take your index finger, and we're going to move this back 1 fret, and just play the B string right there. Sharp 11. And then if you want to bar across there and grab the 7th fret on the high E, then that's a C major 9 sharp, C major 9 sharp 11. You know, over G right there. Now if you want to up the ante again, move that index finger down 1 more fret. And that's really cool. Add 9, add 11. And then if you bar across and grab that 6th fret on the high E too, then you've got a C major 9, add 11. So we're definitely getting in this Holdsworth territory. That's a very difficult chord, so don't hurt yourself. But we went from here to here to here. Another thing we can do to twist these chords a little bit, let's go back to that C major add 9 we had right here. And then let's change this. We're going to modify it to John Petrucci's, you know, add 9 sharp 11 chord, which this did pop up in the stretch guitar chord episode before this one. But there's, you know, C add 9 or C major add 9 sharp 11. Definitely, if you like Lydian, you know, use that chord and then just start jamming Lydian over the top of it. It sounds awesome. You'll sound like Steve Vai or somebody. And then you could also experiment with moving this over again. You know, your third finger is going to basically grab this B flat right there, and you're going to grab this, which so that's a C minor 7 add 9. You know, really cool chord. All right, next up, now we're going to flip these major add 9s to minor add 9s, and that's going to help you create some chords that you can scare your family or your neighbors with or something. But take, you know, C minor add 9, like this. Okay? And then what I want you to do is we're going to basically remove, you know, the root note down here. And I want you to stretch back, and we're going to grab the 6th fret right there on the B and the high E, which this is crazy. You have a fret in between all of your fingers. That's definitely Holdsworth approved right there. That would be a C minor 9 add 11 over G, which I know that's a big name for that chord, and it's very challenging. So be careful, you know, putting those frets between each of your fingers. That's a big challenge. Here's a stretching exercise using one of Allan's favorite shapes, this minor 13 fingering, and this is a really unusual chord. I love the sound though. C minor 13 right there. There's your C, E flat, there's the 13, the A, and you got B flat and E flat hiding there on the B and the high E string too. Now take this and move it down a minor third. Now you're playing A minor 13. And that's going to force you to stretch a little bit because we're a little further, you know, down the fretboard. Take that, move it down another minor third. Now you're playing G flat minor 13. And then if you're brave and you're daring, you can move it down again, and you're basically going to move into this E flat minor 13 like this. This is really hard. I'm going to clean that up a little bit. That's really tough. So be careful with that exercise, you know, and you wouldn't want to move too far, too fast. I just wanted to show you how you can move it down. You know, maybe just move it down a fret at a time at first. And then you can, you know, slowly get used to kind of moving it, you know, the way I just kind of showed you right there. Because those are really tough chords. With the opening, that's one of my favorite Holdsworth tunes, Letters of Marque from the I.O.U. album, and there's some really cool chords happening here. So it's really unusual, and you've got this to start with. And a lot of guitarists, I don't think, really explore these bottom, kind of lower triads like that. But that's basically a B over F sharp right there. It's going to feel like E major, but you're on the wrong strings right there. You kind of moved over. And then you're going to shift this C sharp minor over G sharp to D sharp minor over A sharp. I mean, they're implied chords. So you're definitely kind of cruising along those bottom strings. Then grab this C sharp, and then you're going to play D major 7 right there, like this. And then you're going to grab this partial E minor 7, shift that up a whole step to F sharp minor 7, grab this, you know, B note on the high E right there, and then the last shape, this is really cool. So that's basically a C major 13 add 11. So avoid the B string. You don't want to play that B string right there. Let me just walk through those chords again. And the way I'm kind of picking that, I actually kind of sweep in a way. I kind of pick the bottom 4 strings, and then I hybrid pick with my middle finger to sound that high E string. You could experiment with it. You know, Allan definitely used a pick, but he had a very light touch, and he used a lot of legato too. So it's really hard to emulate, his style correctly, where it sounds the way it does on the albums. Next up is the opening chord from the song White Line from the I.O.U. album. And technically this chord did appear in the previous episode, the stretch guitar chord episode. And it was in a different key, but the opening to White Line is something like this. So that's technically an A flat add 11. Or you could think of it like an A flat add 4. I've seen it written that way too. I don't know if you recognize it, but if you move it up basically to the key of B right here, and then think Joe Satriani, it's the Always With Me, Always With You chord. Which we had that in the previous episode, but now we're in A flat for Allan Holdsworth here. Signaling out Joe Satriani, but that's probably exactly where that chord came from, for the Always With Me, Always With You, because Joe definitely loves Allan Holdsworth. Last examples from the song Shallow Sea, which is also from the I.O.U. album, and I did warn you earlier that I was going to get stuck on that one album. But, Holdsworth's other albums are great, but there's just something about, some of the music on that really resonates with me. But I did add some reverb and delay just to kind of give it a little bit more of a spacious sound. It does have a lot of synth and this dreamlike, kind of sound to the song, but it's something like this. And I'm also playing it finger style because I'm not really sure how he attacked this, if he was using a pick, but something like this. Really, really cool. So it actually starts here, and that's basically an E major 7. But played, in a really unusual way. Not this way, it's that way. So you're kind of playing like an open voice triad here, and then the major 7's right there on the top like a cherry. Really cool. Then you're going to basically go from there to this. And right there you're basically barring the 10th fret on the A and the D, and then you're also grabbing the 12th fret there on the B and the high E. And that's a C major 7 over G implied. And then you're going to basically kind of borrow what we did at the beginning like this and do it down a whole step. So now basically do D major 7, and then you're going to move up and grab this. That's A major 7 sus2 over E. That's basically when you kind of move up to that D note right there. That's the sus4, but you're doing it like that. And then you're going to start right here and do F. There's F major 7. And then you're going to move all the way up here. And that's basically, kind of mimicking, it's almost like a mirror image of what we did earlier. So we had this, where we started with E major 7, and then answer that with this. Move down a whole step and do the same thing. Except you're going to add that D note right there. And then right there is where it moves to F major 7. Then you want to move up to this, and that's basically a C sharp major 7 over G sharp. And then you're going to move all the way down and kind of, once again, mimic what we were doing through this progression. You're going to move down here. That's basically E flat major 7 now. So we've covered a lot of ground. We started with E major 7, moved all the way through that progression. Now we're winding up with E flat major 7. And then this last chord's really cool, and it features one of Holdsworth's kind of chordal, tapped ideas. When you're doing that, that's basically going to be an E flat flat 5 over D. And you're basically tapping, this A note right there on the 10th fret on the B string. So you're grabbing, this 5th fret bar on the A and the D, the 8th fret there on the G, the 6th fret on the high E, and you're going to tap that A note right there. And I love those kind of sounds. Especially if you can get it all to kind of ring together like that. So cool. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with the Chords of Allan Holdsworth, and I'm not going to fool anybody. I can barely play, Allan's music. It's really, really difficult. And I've learned a few licks, I've learned some chords, like little parts of songs. I don't even know if I actually qualify as, being able to say I've learned a riff from his songs, or a cycle of a progression. Because anytime I've visited his music, I've really just kind of locked into a couple chords, maybe a phrase or a lick or two, and then I kind of walk away from it, because it's very demanding. It just exhausts you after you're sitting there working on something of his, for a couple hours, like, or whatever. You need to take a break and kind of get away from it and then come back to it. So he's definitely this guitar mountain that I kind of return to and climb around on. And then I get off that mountain because I realize, okay, I'm not Allan Holdsworth. I don't think really anybody on planet Earth can really, do his music justice. There are some people out there that can definitely, emulate, some of his sounds and get really close. But definitely Allan Holdsworth was 1 in a billion or 1 in a quadrillion or whatever. Leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content material. Thank you.